Hello, my name is Justin McClain, and for Theology 605, Foundations of Morality, I'll be talking about what are the moral implications of family leave policies within society as considered in light of the Church's social justice teachings. There are three articles that I read, particularly in preparation for this presentation. The first being James Carr's 1987 article, Bringing Up Baby, the Case for a Federal Parental Leave Act. The premise is that corporations and other institutions reinforced by federal initiatives have social responsibilities regarding family leave policies. Paramount, of course, is concern for the family. The family, as has been reinforced by church teaching for 2,000 years, is the most basic unit of society. It's a core institution. The future of society is either threatened when the family is threatened or is able to flourish when the family is able to flourish. The family nurtures human qualities that build up society, including a loving atmosphere, an atmosphere in which learning takes place, an atmosphere of trust, and so forth. The family forms the entire person, cognitively, emotionally, socially, and physically. The family is ideal when it comes to achieving appropriate psychological development. When it comes to young children in particular situations, such as a newborn child, a child that is newly adopted, a child that is, God forbid, seriously ill, there are times in which the mother and the father must be able to take care of the child. And it's most important that the family is placed first and foremost in terms of all considerations. There are complementary parental roles played by the mother and the father. Various pontiffs, particularly since the 20th century into the 21st century, including in a special way Pope St. John Paul II, Pope Benedict XVI, and Pope Francis have all reinforced the complementary roles that mothers and fathers play in bringing up their children. In terms of the workforce, the sociological reality is that more women have entered the workforce, and in fact, a majority of adult women now work. Of course, likewise, stay-at-home mothers fill a critical role within society. Fathers are called to be more involved with their children increasingly than in past generations. Fathers, of course, cannot remain aloof when it comes to the bringing up of their children. And of course, single-parent homes are particularly challenged by a lack of extended parent leave. So when it comes to families in any situation, whether an intact family or a single-parent household, it's very important to consider the needs of the child when looking at various leave policies that can be put in place. There's a certain necessity when it comes to extended leave for the purposes of bonding with the young child, particularly in the earliest months of life. At the federal level, there have been various governmental policies that are ideally sweeping in nature, but occasionally do not take into account other factors. And it is lamentable to concede that the United States is alone among industrialized nations when it comes to a lack of substantively extended paid family leave. At the state level, of course, in terms of states' autonomy, there is the reality that states have certain policies that may not be as supportive as the federal level, or not even as supportive as the managerial level when it comes to offering paid family leave. This can be problematic if a state's interests conflict with interests at either the federal or individual managerial levels. At the managerial or institutional level, the ideal is to be generous in the interest of raising employee morale, with the understanding that the more productive an employee is, the more he or she tends to be able to contribute further to the company. When it comes to fostering that productivity, effectively, it is frequently understood that when an employee is able to take care of his or her responsibilities at home, when it comes to being present for his or her children, then we have higher employee morale. That's been reinforced generation upon generation. There are two conclusive excerpts at the conclusion of James Carr's article that are quite telling. The first is from Congressman Frank Wolf of Virginia, who reminded us back in 1983 that Congress and our government have neglected the needs of the American family, and we may have forgotten the important role that the family plays in shaping America. In contrast to what may be perceived as America's long-standing disregard for the family institution, the tradition around the world has been to place great emphasis on the family. And of course, we have St. John Paul II, who wrote in Familiaris Consortio in 1981 that in the conviction that the good of the family is an indispensable and essential value of the civil community, the public authorities must do everything possible to ensure that families have all those aids, economic, social, educational, political, and cultural assistance that they need in order to face all their responsibilities in a human way. The second article is from Teresa Moran, and it has a lengthier title, The Importance of Access to Benefits under the Family Medical Leave Act for Low-Income Families for Bonding and Attachment Facilitation with a Fragile Infant and the Role of the Social Worker. That's from 2014. The premise of Teresa Moran's article is that the paucity of universal family leave policies has an adverse effect on all families, but especially on low-income families. There is a need to defend the family per se, in the interest of the well-being of the children. With the family being the most basic unit of society, it is the ideal situation within which children are able to undergo their earlier years. The intact family greatly strengthens society. Children in low-income households have particular vulnerabilities. There's a higher incidence of children born prematurely, a higher prevalence of infants in the neonatal intensive care unit, more commonly referred to by its acronym NICU. Sociodemographic risk factors can occur following curtailed bonding. There is a necessity of extended family leave in the interest of fostering this bonding between the parents and the young child. Parents' inability to frequently visit an infant in intensive care can cause adverse effects in the child's life, not only in the earliest years, but also in the years to come, in the decades to come, indeed. Therefore, workplaces often do not accommodate such extensive leave, whereas they ideally could, in order to foster this early bonding. Young babies exhibit intrinsic behaviors such as rooting, crying, smiling, etc., that indicate the yearn for bonding, that indicate subconsciously the desire to bond. Parents do not necessarily have this innate understanding of the need for the very young to bond at such an early age. In terms of healthy socialization, infants need physical touch, soft conversation, and other stimuli from their parents in the interest of their physical, emotional, psychological, and overall holistic development, particularly in the first few months. The Family Medical Leave Act is a good start, but it does have its pitfalls. It does have its pitfalls and other inadequacies when it comes to its comparison to paid extended family leave. Other considerations must be in place. For example, there is more of a need from society to foster the importance of the family. We live in times, unfortunately, that are so mired by individualism, materialism, consumerism, and the individual has de facto replaced the family as the most basic unit of society. But whereas we are social creatures, families have, across civilizations and across generations, been the most fundamental and the most influential influence on society. So therefore, more societal support is needed, and also more job security is needed so that employees can be guaranteed a position following necessarily extended bonding, that necessarily extended period of bonding between the parents and the child, especially between the mother and the child, which is so especially vital. The third article is Bridget Ravitsa's and Karen Peterson Ayer's Motherhood and Tenure: Can Catholic Universities Support Both? From 2005. The premise being that women seeking tenure while caring for a family should be afforded an appropriate level of consideration when it comes to being able to prioritize family over career concerns. Women seeking tenure in academia unfortunately are too often discouraged either directly or indirectly from motherhood due to perception that professional concerns are paramount. The tenure system features various criteria, the three traditional ones being scholarship, teaching, and service. The frequently unspoken criterion is that of collegiality. And this can be challenging for mothers in academia since motherhood is unfortunately too often frowned upon among certain colleagues within the academic field, whether spoken or unspoken. There have been plenty of both cases. Women seeking tenure in Catholic higher education specifically is a concern that must be noted from the Church's perspective. The Catholic universities throughout the world, particularly, unfortunately, the United States, are not necessarily renowned when it comes to family accommodation. Some are more renowned and supportive than others, but overall, the dignity of family, life, and work must continue to be paramount. Life being the inherent dignity from conception through natural death. Family, to reiterate, being the most basic unit of society, while mothers and fathers have irreplaceable roles in their children's lives. And of course, with work, various church leaders have spoken about the dignity of work, which is an important Christian principle. There are certain recommendations in place for Catholic colleges and universities in particular. The first being more generous paid maternity and paternity leave. The second being more flexibility in the work week and the reduction of stringent workloads for professors who have young children. The third being an adjusted path to tenure for professors with young children. The fourth being taking time off to raise children should not be deemed an inactive period. The fifth being explorations and more just wages and benefits. And the sixth being more on-campus childcare can be explored. Returning to the original question, what are the moral implications of the family leave policies within society as considered in light of the Church's social justice teachings? In order to consider this question, it is necessary to emphasize that three factors are important: human life, the family, and work. The Church's moral teachings indicate that child life is a paramount consideration, particularly considering the innocence of the unborn child. This is a stance that the Church has maintained for going on 2,000 years. In Pope St. John Paul II's 1993 encyclical, Veritatis Splendor, the Holy Father discussed certain offenses against human life that radically contradict the good of the person made in God's image. That's from Veritatis Splendor, paragraph 80. The inviolability of human life is undergirded by the natural law, on which is based the human desire to defend, support, and advocate for the most vulnerable and weakest in society. The family, as the most basic unit of society, is critically important. This is especially so in the 21st century, when many forces threaten the stability of the family united as a mother, a father, and their children. The family is more crucial a consideration than anyone's employment prospects. As important as these are when it comes to providing the family with the means to survive and function with material needs being met. Various segments of society, including the governmental and managerial levels, should have a greater interest in the flourishing of the family. The Church serves as a force to contribute to this dialogue, given the vast importance of the family in terms of the proper advancement of society. There must be more efforts aimed at ensuring that leave policies place a much greater emphasis on the nurturing of children than on productivity or other measures of so-called secular quote-unquote success, which are based on merely earthly standards and pale in comparison to the inalienable significance of the unified family structure. Of course, unfortunately, sometimes parents have to raise their children alone due to any number of factors. It is important to foster means by which single parents can support their children without fear of jeopardizing their employment prospects when the employer does not offer any semblance of extended paid family leave. Various studies have indicated that it is possible for society to support children and healthily functioning family life by providing leave policies that are more extensive in their scope. This is a moral imperative because it affords greater human dignity to the family and to children, and is a special consideration when it comes to specifically Catholic organizations' leave policies, since they are expected to be pro-life and pro-family. There are glimpses of hope, such as in the Archdiocese of Chicago, which announced in the spring of 2016 that it will provide paid family leave for its employees for up to 3 months, that critical period of the first few months of life. This measure and the Family Medical Leave Act are steps considerably in the right direction, but even more accommodations would be welcome to facilitate even greater bonding between parents and their young children. To conclude, how fitting that, further regarding Veritatis Splendor, it was within the midst of Pope John Paul II's discussion of offenses against the dignity of human life that the late Holy Father and now celebrated saint discussed the degrading conditions of work which treat laborers as mere instruments of profit and not as free, responsible persons. Veritatis Splendor, paragraph 80. The Church's role in fostering a healthier balance of the family and work, all in the interest of serving children first and foremost, can thus help to defend human dignity in the interest of the kingdom of God. Thank you.